The alien Empress chose me as her mate, while I was just a servant. Sci-Fi HFY story. I had always been just a servant, working in the vast halls of the Galactic Empire's most opulent palace. As an orphan from a small backwater planet, I never imagined I would ever rise above my lowly station. My days consisted of cleaning floors, polishing the precious artifacts of the imperial family, and tending to the needs of the elite. But that was before she came into my life, the alien Empress. Her name was Empress Lixera, and she was unlike any being I had ever seen. A towering figure, radiating with the strength of 1,000 suns. Her skin shimmered with iridescent scales, shifting between deep purples and fiery reds. Her eyes glowed like twin nebulae, full of power and mystery. She ruled over countless worlds, her empire stretching across galaxies, and her voice could command the obedience of even the most unruly star fleets. It was a day like any other when I first saw her. I was mopping the grand hallway, head down, lost in my task, when the echo of her approach vibrated through the stone floors. A hushed silence fell over the palace as her procession arrived, her guards parting the way for her, like the sea itself had been split in two. "Servant," she called, her voice deep, yet oddly gentle. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. She was addressing me. I lifted my eyes to meet her gaze, barely able to stand the overwhelming presence of her beauty and power. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The world around me faded, and all that existed were her glowing eyes and the weight of her words. "You have caught my attention," she said, her voice carrying a strange warmth that sent a shiver down my spine. "I have seen your dedication, your unwavering loyalty to your duties. For a servant, you possess something rare. What is your name?" "Zane," I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. "Zane of Earth." "Zane," she repeated, rolling the name in her mouth as though tasting it. "You are more than you appear. Zane of Earth. I will not ignore the spark in you." I was speechless. The Empress, the ruler of countless worlds, was speaking to me, a lowly servant. It made no sense. Why would she care about me? I was nothing compared to the warriors, the noble-born elites, the influential leaders who surrounded her. But she wasn't finished. "I have decided," she continued, her words striking me like a thunderclap. "You will be my mate." The room seemed to spin, and I almost collapsed. The Empress? Choosing me? It was a privilege beyond anything I could comprehend. How could I, a mere servant, be worthy of such an honor? She seemed to sense my disbelief and smiled softly, her gaze never leaving mine. "I see your doubt, but I choose not only for power or status. I choose for strength, courage, and loyalty. You, Zane, possess those qualities. You will stand by my side as an equal, not as a servant. You will become more than you ever imagined." Her words rang in my ears, and I felt a surge of emotions I couldn't process. Fear, excitement, confusion, and beneath it all, a strange sense of destiny. The palace buzzed with whispers, but Lixera paid them no mind. She stepped closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from her, her presence overwhelming. She extended a hand to me, the long, graceful fingers adorned with gems that gleamed like stars. "Come," she said, "the future of the Empire awaits us. Together, we will shape it." And just like that, my life changed forever. From that moment on, I was no longer a servant. I was the mate of the most powerful being in the universe, and I had no idea where this path would lead. But for the first time, I felt that I was part of something greater than myself. I had been chosen, and with that, I would stand beside Empress Lixera, not just as her mate, but as her equal. We would face the galaxy together, a human and an alien, bound by something stronger than power or position, by the bond we had forged between us. The universe had no idea what was coming, but I did, and I was ready. The alien Empress chose me as her mate, while I was just a servant. Sci-Fi HFY Story, Part 2. In the days that followed, I struggled to comprehend what had happened. One moment, I was scrubbing the marble floors of the palace. The next, I was standing beside the Empress herself, a woman of unimaginable power and grace. It felt like a dream, one that I kept waiting to wake from, only to find myself still in the reality of it. The palace had never been more alive with activity. Word of my promotion spread like wildfire, and every time I crossed a corridor, eyes followed me, curious, calculating, or envious. The nobles who once looked down on me now whispered behind their hands, their gazes sharp as daggers. I felt the weight of their judgment, but it no longer mattered. I was no longer their servant. Lixura ensured that I would be trained in the ways of her people. She insisted that I learn the customs, the language, and the history of the galaxy she ruled. Every moment, I was at her side, studying under her direct guidance. She took a personal interest in my development, which made everything feel even more surreal. But despite the attention, I was constantly aware of the vast gulf between us. She was a being of incredible power, capable of commanding fleets of ships and armies of warriors with a single thought. I was a human from a planet they saw as primitive, my people only recently discovering space travel. How could I, in my simplest form, stand beside someone like her? One evening, as we sat alone in her chambers, an extravagant room with walls adorned in living vines that shimmered with bioluminescence, Lixura seemed to sense my unease. "Zane," she said, her voice a soothing melody that calmed the storm in my chest. "You are troubled." I nodded, unsure of how to voice the chaos inside me. "I don't know how to be what you expect me to be. You chose me, but I'm not like you. I don't have the power, the experience, the knowledge. I'm just me." She smiled, a rare and gentle expression that softened the sharp edges of her powerful features. "That is exactly why I chose you." I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "You are human," she said, her voice unwavering. "In a universe filled with countless races and species, you are unique. Your people have the ability to adapt, to grow stronger in the face of adversity. The fire that burns in your heart, Zane, is unlike anything I have seen in the beings of my empire. It is why you will be the perfect mate for me." "But," I started, but she raised a hand to stop me. "No," she said softly, "you do not need to be like me. You need only to be yourself. The strength I seek in you is not power over others, but the resilience of your spirit. It is in your humanity that I see something rare, something precious. You will lead beside me, not because of what you have, but because of who you are." Her words settled in my mind, and for the first time, I truly understood. My value wasn't in how I compared to the grandeur of her world, but in the simple truths of what it meant to be human, the strength to persevere, to overcome, and to rise against odds that seemed insurmountable. Those were the qualities she saw in me. As the days passed, I became more confident. Lixura's lessons were not just academic. She taught me about the heart of leadership, the nature of her people, and the balance between power and compassion. I came to realize that she had been grooming me not to just be her consort, but her partner, her equal in every sense. And then, the time came for our first public appearance as a unified force, the Empress and her mate, human, a symbol of the union between our species. The day was as monumental for me as it was for the galaxy. The grand hall was filled with representatives from across the Empire, alien species from distant star systems, their eyes filled with curiosity and uncertainty. The moment we entered, the entire room went silent. Lixura walked at my side, her presence commanding the attention of all who stood before her. But this time, I did not feel like the insignificant servant I once was. I stood tall, by her side, with a newfound purpose. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting something deeper than I had ever seen. "You will speak," she said softly. I blinked. "Speak? To all of them?" "Yes," she replied. "Let them hear your voice. Let them understand why I chose you." I took a deep breath, stepping forward to face the assembly. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and 1,000 eyes turned toward me. I was about to speak to the rulers of the galaxy, species older than time itself, beings with more power than I could ever imagine. But as I opened my mouth, I realized something. They weren't looking at me as a servant. They were looking at me as her equal. "I come from a small, forgotten corner of the galaxy," I began, my voice steady. "But I stand before you today not as a servant, but as the maid of Empress Lixura. My people may be young, but we are strong, we are resilient, and together, we will forge a future in which we all rise, no matter where we come from." For the first time, I felt the weight of my own worth, not just in her eyes, but in the eyes of the entire galaxy. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause filled the air. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was genuine respect, recognition of the bond that had formed between the two of us. Lixura stepped closer, her eyes meeting mine with pride. "See, Zane," she whispered, "you are more than you ever thought, and together, we will reshape this galaxy." The future had arrived, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to face it. The alien Empress chose me as her mate, while I was just a servant. Sci-Fi HFY Story, Part 3. The weeks that followed our public debut felt like a whirlwind. Life at the palace, once filled with monotonous routines, had transformed into something unrecognizable. As Empress Lixura's mate, I was no longer a shadow in the background. I was now at the center of a world I could barely comprehend. A world where power, politics, and destiny collided in ways I was still learning to understand. But it wasn't just the royal court that had taken notice of our bond. Throughout the galaxy, whispers of the human who stood at the side of the most powerful being in the universe spread like wildfire. While many revered Empress Lixura's strength and wisdom, they were equally fascinated by the idea of a human, an insignificant species by galactic standards, being chosen as her mate. I had learned quickly that the galaxy was full of surprises. There were countless species of all shapes, sizes, and capabilities, each with their own complex cultures and histories. Some of them saw the union as a symbol of the Empress's progressive nature, others as a political move. But in the deepest corners of the empire, among the dissenters and rebels, some saw it as a threat, an affront to the established order. One night, as I walked alongside Lixura in the gardens of the palace, a rare moment of peace amidst the chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Zane," she said, her voice cutting through my thoughts, "you are troubled again." I had tried to keep my worries to myself, but she always knew when something was weighing on my mind. "There's talk," I admitted quietly. "Whispers of rebellion. People think this union is a threat to the established order." She stopped, her long, graceful fingers brushing against the petals of a glowing flower. "You fear they will rise against us?" "I fear for you," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You've ruled this empire for so long, and now, with me, someone like me, by your side, there's no telling how the galaxy will react." She turned to face me, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, she smiled softly, a rare warmth in her eyes. "I chose you because I saw something in you that others do not. The universe may not understand us, but it is irrelevant. What matters is our strength and our vision. Together, we will not just survive, we will thrive." "But what if the rebels rise? What if they challenge your rule?" I pressed, my voice betraying my concern. "Then we fight," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "But I will not allow fear to guide our path. You must believe in our bond, Zane. It is not just a matter of power, it is a matter of conviction, of unity. You and I, together, we are more than any enemy could ever imagine." Her confidence was infectious, and though I still had doubts, I found myself standing a little taller, feeling the weight of the responsibility she had entrusted me with. For the first time in my life, I realized that I wasn't just a bystander in the grand tapestry of the galaxy. I was a key player in something far greater than myself. The very next day, our world would be tested. Word came that the rebel factions, those who opposed Lixura's reign, had begun to mobilize, their forces gathering on a distant planet. They were ready to strike. The Empire's spies had informed us that they planned to launch an attack on the heart of the Empress's power, the capital planet, where Lixura's throne was located. It wasn't just a military threat, it was a direct challenge to our rule. If they succeeded, the Empire would crumble, and our union would be torn apart before it had truly begun. Lixura wasted no time. Within hours, she called together her war council, high-ranking generals, strategists, and advisors, and I, for the first time, was invited to sit among them. My heart raced as I walked into the command center, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I was no longer just an observer. I was part of the decisions that would shape the fate of the galaxy. Lixura stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding respect from every person in the room. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Zane," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber, "you know the heart of humanity better than anyone else. What do you think our next move should be?" The room fell silent, all eyes were on me, waiting for my response. I could feel the pressure building, the tension in the air. My mind raced, but somehow, in that moment, everything clicked. This was my chance, not just to be her mate, but to prove that I was worthy of standing by her side. We cannot just fight them head-on, I said, finding my voice. The rebel forces are organized, and they're determined. If we engage them directly, it will be a slaughter for both sides. Instead, we need to divide them, create confusion, make them question their strength. I know the capital planet's terrain. We could use its resources to set traps, create distractions, and weaken their resolve before we engage. Lixura's eyes narrowed in thought. You would use the environment to your advantage? Yes, I replied. I've seen how these rebels operate. They rely too much on brute force. They'll expect us to face them directly. If we strike at their supply lines, disrupt their communications, and keep them guessing, we can neutralize their strength without risking a full-scale battle. For a long moment, there was silence as everyone in the room processed my words. Then, one of the generals, a hulking alien with scales like polished obsidian, grunted in approval. The human speaks wisely. Lixura nodded, her gaze fixed on me with a deep appreciation. Very well, she said, her voice resolute. We will implement Zane's strategy. Prepare the fleet. We strike at dawn. The plan was set in motion, and as the hours passed, I found myself at Lixura's side once more, watching as the galaxy's most powerful forces prepared for war. In the midst of the chaos, I felt something shift within me. This was my place now, not as a servant, not as a mere bystander, but as a partner in something far bigger than I had ever imagined. Together, Lixura and I would face the storm. Together, we would rise. And together, we would reshape the galaxy. To be continued. The alien Empress chose me as her mate, while I was just a servant. Sci-Fi HFY Story, Part 4. The battle was upon us. The sun on the capital planet dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the sprawling cities and vast fields that stretched beneath the towering spires of the imperial palace. It was a stark contrast to the tension building in the heart of the palace. The moment we had prepared for had arrived. The rebels were coming. As the fleet assembled in orbit, ready to launch a counterattack, the War Council had gathered one last time in the command center. Lixura stood before the massive holographic display, her posture regal, her eyes steady with determination. Her gaze, however, often flickered to me, as though seeking my thoughts before making every move. I had earned her trust, she had made that clear, but now, more than ever, I had to prove my worth, not just as her mate, but as a partner, someone capable of making decisions that would affect millions of lives across the galaxy. We divide their forces, I said, my voice unwavering as I addressed the generals and strategists gathered around the table. By using the capital's terrain to our advantage, we can force them into positions where they'll be vulnerable. Once their ranks are scattered, we'll launch a two-pronged attack, one at their main camp, another to disrupt their retreat routes. Lixura nodded approvingly, her sharp eyes scanning the tactics on the holographic map. And you're certain they will fall for this? She asked, her tone calm but probing. I've studied them, I replied, glancing at the generals for confirmation. These rebels rely too much on brute force and underestimating their enemy. They won't expect us to fight differently. The general to my left, a towering insectoid with 6 eyes, clicked his mandibles in agreement. The human is correct. Their strategies are predictable. We can manipulate their tactics by using what they least expect, guerrilla-style engagements, sudden ambushes, and swift strikes to disrupt their cohesion. Lixura's lips curled into a smile. Then it is settled. We act tonight. With the plan set in motion, we moved quickly. The Imperial fleet, a massive armada of ships, was ready to deploy, but Lixura insisted that I accompany her on the ground, to oversee the execution of the plan firsthand. I knew she trusted me, but this felt different. This felt like the moment where I would either prove myself or be swallowed by the enormity of the task before us. We arrived at the Forward Command Center, a complex deep within the city's underground levels. Lixura's transport ship landed silently on the hidden platform, where several elite soldiers awaited us. I could feel the weight of their gazes as we disembarked, sizing me up, no doubt wondering why the Empress had chosen a human to stand alongside her in such a critical operation. Zane, Lixura said as she stepped toward me, we must move swiftly. Time is against us. I'm with you, I responded, though my heart raced. I was no longer just a man from a forgotten planet. I was now the mate of the Empress, and my decisions could determine the fate of the entire empire. As the hours passed, we moved through the city with precision, our every step calculated. Rebel forces were scattered across the capital, but their main camp was located just outside the city's perimeter. We had to act quickly to cut them off before they could reinforce their positions. The first strike came at dawn. The Empress's fleet launched from the sky, their ships descending in an eerie silence, cutting through the cloud cover like blades through soft flesh. It was a spectacular show of power, the Empire's forces descending upon the rebels with overwhelming force. But it was the ground operations that would make or break us. I was stationed alongside Lixura in a command post deep within the city, where we monitored the battle in real time. As expected, the rebels were caught off guard by our unorthodox strategy. Our surprise strikes disrupted their formations, throwing them into disarray. But just as we were beginning to gain ground, a new threat emerged, an unexpected wave of reinforcements. The rebels had a hidden force, one that had remained in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. They broke through our flanks, pushing back our troops with fierce resistance. I watched as Lixura's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing in concentration. They were holding back, she muttered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. We need to adapt, now. I felt the tension in the air, the shift in the battle. If we didn't act quickly, the Empire's forces would be overrun. We need to flank them, I said, my voice rising above the din. Use the alleyways and underground passages. I know the city's layout. We can cut them off from the rear and force them into a pincer. Lixura's gaze met mine, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood run cold, a flash of fear. Something I had never seen before, but it was fleeting. Within seconds, her resolve returned. Do it, she ordered. I relayed the command to the soldiers, and within moments, we launched a counteroffensive. The rebels, unaware of our move, were caught between two advancing forces. The shock and chaos of it all was enough to break their morale. One by one, their resistance crumbled. It wasn't long before we received word that the rebel leaders had been captured. The battle was over. Lixura's fleet had ensured the rebellion would not threaten the Empire's borders again. But for me, it wasn't just about the victory, it was about the moment I realized that I had made a difference. That I had contributed something meaningful to the Empress's vision. Together, we had not only defended the Empire, but also set a new precedent for what it meant to rule through unity and strength. As the day ended and the sun began to rise again over the capital, Lixura turned to me, her expression softening. You were right, Zane, she said, her voice carrying the weight of our shared victory. Your insight, your understanding, it made all the difference. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride I had never known. We did this together. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment longer, as if measuring something. Finally, she spoke again, her tone full of meaning. This is only the beginning. We have many challenges ahead, but with you by my side, I know we can face anything. And in that moment, I knew she was right. No matter what the future held, we were no longer just the Empress and her mate. We were a force. Together, we would reshape the galaxy, not through conquest or fear, but through something far stronger. Unity, and the strength that comes from it. To be continued. The alien Empress chose me as her mate, while I was just a servant. Sci-Fi HFY Story, Part 5. The victory against the rebels had been a turning point, not just for the Empire, but for me. I had once stood at the edges of the galaxy, insignificant, just another servant in a faraway palace. Now, I was standing shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful being in the universe, my voice carrying weight in the decisions of the galaxy. But as I quickly learned, victory brought its own set of challenges. The days following our triumph were filled with celebrations and festivities. The capital planet's streets flooded with citizens celebrating the end of the rebellion. Lixura, in her wisdom, had made sure to extend an olive branch to those rebels who were willing to lay down their arms, offering them amnesty in exchange for their loyalty. But even amidst the jubilations, I could feel the undercurrent of tension. There were whispers, quiet ones, but enough to be heard. It was clear that not everyone in the Empire was happy with how quickly the balance had shifted. The nobles, the old guard, those who had once looked down on me as little more than a servant, now saw me as a symbol of a future they did not control. It was unsettling, to be honest. One evening, As I sat with Lixura in her private quarters, the silence between us felt heavy. She had been reading reports from across the galaxy, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a holographic screen. But tonight, she wasn't as composed as usual. Her eyes were tired, and a deep furrow had settled between her brows. "Zane," she said quietly, her voice betraying a hint of concern. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" I turned to her, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "The way things have been changing so quickly," she said, her gaze distant. "The balance of power in the galaxy, it is shifting. I've always ruled with strength, but now we face a different kind of threat. One that does not come from armies or fleets, but from the very foundations of my empire." I stood and crossed the room to her side. "Are you saying you regret the choices we made, choosing me?" She shook her head, her dark eyes meeting mine with a warmth that melted the uncertainty I had felt for the past few days. "No, Zane, I do not regret choosing you. You have proven yourself time and again. But I see now that this path we are on will not be easy. There are those who will not accept our union. There are forces within my own court, even in my closest circles, who would see us torn apart." I could feel the weight of her words, the cold realization that our victory was not the end, but rather the beginning of a much greater battle. A battle not of weapons, but of ideologies. "We'll face it together," I said, taking her hand in mine. "If they won't accept us, we'll show them why they should. Our bond, our strength, it's not something that can be easily broken." Lixura looked at me with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "You are right, Zane. Our strength lies in what we share. But we must be careful. The seeds of dissent have been planted, and they will grow if we are not vigilant." The next few weeks were marked by a flurry of political maneuvering. Lixura convened meetings with high-ranking officials, gathering the support of those who still remained loyal to her and our vision. But in the shadows, there were whispers of plots and betrayals. Even within her own council, some began to question the wisdom of our union. I could feel the shift in the air. There was an unease that wasn't there before, a gnawing suspicion that something was about to break. And then, it happened. One evening, as we were preparing for a diplomatic gathering, a summit meant to solidify alliances with neighboring systems, Lixura was informed of a disturbing piece of news. A faction within her own court had made a move. They had seized control of several critical resources, and their influence was growing. These were not just disgruntled nobles. They were power-hungry individuals who saw our union as a threat to their control. "It's a coup," Lixura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've aligned themselves with the last remnants of the rebel forces. They're trying to undermine my authority." The weight of her words struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a political challenge, it was a direct threat to everything we had fought for. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a rare vulnerability. "We act quickly. If we don't strike now, the empire could fracture. We must have the loyalty of the military, the people, and the key systems. If we lose that, everything we've built will crumble." We knew what we had to do. It was time for us to face the heart of the rebellion, not the one outside the walls of the capital, but the one growing inside it. We gathered our most trusted allies and initiated a swift counterattack. It was a calculated risk, one that could either solidify our rule or destroy everything. The coup leaders had underestimated us, and in their haste, they had made critical mistakes. Lixura, with her brilliant mind and unmatched strength, knew how to use those mistakes to our advantage. The battle wasn't fought with weapons or fleets, it was fought in the halls of power, in the chambers of those who had once called themselves the Empress's most trusted advisors. As we worked to root out the traitors, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what this meant. This wasn't just about a fight for control, it was a fight for the future of an entire galaxy. By the time the dust settled, the coup had been quashed, the traitors were either captured or exiled, and the loyalty of the military and key systems was secured. Lixura had emerged victorious once again, but at a cost. The price of power, of leadership, was never light. As we stood together in the aftermath, I could feel the bond between us stronger than ever. We had faced the darkness, and we had come out on top. "Zane," Lixura said, her voice tired but resolute, "we have won this battle, but there will always be others. We must continue to fight, not just for our empire, but for our future." I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, and looked out over the sprawling city below. We will face it together, Lixura. No matter what comes, we stand united. In that moment, I knew that this galaxy, with all its complexity and danger, was ours to shape, and together, we would carve a path forward, one built on trust, strength, and a bond that no force could ever break. To be continued. The alien Empress chose me as her mate, while I was just a servant. Sci-Fi HFY Story, Part 6. The aftermath of the coup was both a victory and a warning. We had defeated the traitors who sought to destroy everything we had built. But the scars of the conflict were evident. The very people who had once sworn loyalty to Lixura had turned on her. That betrayal lingered in the air like a cold shadow. The loyalty of the Empire had been tested, and though we had prevailed, there was no doubt that cracks had formed in the foundation. Lixura's rule, once unchallenged, now had visible fissures. The nobles, those who had been too quiet before, were no longer so silent. They watched us, waiting to see how we would heal the Empire, or if it would crumble beneath our feet. But Lixura was undeterred. Every day, she worked tirelessly to mend what had been broken. She spoke to the people, reaffirmed her alliances with the military, and slowly but surely, she began to restore order. The changes she'd promised were still being implemented, and the old ways of the Empire, though slow to die, were beginning to fade into the past. Still, beneath her stoic exterior, I saw the weight of the constant pressure she was under. We both knew that this was only the beginning. The fight for the galaxy, for the future, was far from over. One night, after a long day of meetings and strategy sessions, I found myself walking beside Lixura through the palace's tranquil gardens. The stars above glimmered like distant fires in the vastness of space. There was peace here, for now, and it was a comfort I had learned to cherish. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing enough?" she asked, her voice soft as she glanced up at the night sky. I looked at her, feeling the weight of the question. "I think you're doing everything you can, more than anyone could expect. But the galaxy is vast. There will always be challenges. The question is, how do we face them?" She turned to me, her dark eyes glinting in the starlight. I thought I knew the answer. I thought I could rule with strength, that my power and will alone would be enough to unite the galaxy. But now, I'm beginning to realize that there's more to it. It's not just strength that holds us together. It's trust. It's understanding. She paused, the weight of her words settling in. "And it's you, Zane." I felt a warmth spread through me at her words, but also a sense of responsibility I hadn't fully understood before. "What do you mean?" "Before you, I ruled alone," she said, her voice quieter now. "Even when I had advisors, generals, and allies, I was alone at the top. But now, I see that I don't have to bear it all on my own. Together, we are stronger than I ever could be alone." Her words resonated deep within me. For the first time, I realized just how much of a role I played in this, how much this bond we shared meant. Not just in terms of love or partnership, but in terms of our vision for the galaxy. "You've always been strong, Lixura," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "But you're not alone anymore, and together, we'll build something that will last." She nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, we will." But even as she said it, I could see the flicker of something deeper in her eyes, a weariness, perhaps, or the knowledge that we were standing at the precipice of something much greater than we realized. The following days were filled with both progress and tension. Lixura's reforms were starting to show results. Peace was slowly returning to the far reaches of the Empire. Trade routes were reopening, and the military, which had once been fractured, was beginning to unite once more under her banner. But beneath the surface, there was still a sense of instability. The power struggles among the nobles had only been put on pause, not ended, and we knew the unrest would rise again. One morning, as we sat in the War Council, a new report came through. A powerful faction from one of the distant star systems, the Zorati Syndicate, had begun amassing ships along the borders of our territory. The syndicate was known for its ruthless business practices, but now, it seemed, they were seeking something far more dangerous: expansion. "We've been waiting for this," one of Lixura's military advisors said grimly. "The syndicate has been quietly building their fleet for years. Now they're ready to make a move." I could feel the tension building in the room. The Empire had not been fully unified yet. If the syndicate attacked, It could tear apart everything Lixera had worked so hard to build. We cannot afford to fight them on their terms, I said, speaking up for the first time during this meeting. We need to strike fast, disrupt their supply lines, confuse them. They're not a conventional military force, but they've got numbers. We need to make them doubt their strength, just like we did with the rebels. Lixera turned to me, her eyes thoughtful. Your instincts are right. We will act quickly, and we'll use their own tactics against them. The room fell silent as she made the decision. The war against the Syndicate had begun. In the weeks that followed, the Empire's fleet engaged the Syndicate in a series of lightning-fast battles along the Outer Rim. It was a different kind of war, one of strategy and subterfuge rather than brute force, with the Syndicate's strength divided and their trust in their own superiority shaken. The tide of the battle began to turn in our favor. But even as we achieved victory after victory, I could see that the weight of this war was taking its toll on Lixera. The stress of constant battle, the decisions that had to be made in the heat of conflict, and the constant pressure from those who sought to undermine her rule. She was no longer the confident, unshakable ruler I had first met. She was tired. "Zane," she said one night, as we stood overlooking the battlefield from the palace balcony, "I sometimes wonder if I'm losing myself in all of this. I wanted to protect my people, to bring peace, but I'm not sure if that's still possible." I stepped closer to her, my heart aching at the vulnerability in her voice. "You haven't lost yourself. You're fighting for something bigger than just yourself, and no matter how hard it gets, you don't have to do it alone." Her gaze softened as she looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes that I had seen only once before, the quiet, unspoken trust that had started everything between us. "We'll get through this," she said, her voice steady again, though her shoulders bore the weight of the galaxy. "Together." And as the stars shimmered overhead, I knew she was right. We would face whatever came next, together. No matter the challenge, no matter the enemy, we had come this far, and we would keep going. For the future of the galaxy. For our future. To be continued.